Well, this is the car that we've chosen to wash. This car's in really nice shape, however, it's been sitting outside under some trees. It's got leaves, tree sap, bird droppings, pine needles, everything bad that can possibly damage a paint job is sitting on this car. The good news is it'll clean up very well, but there are some right and wrong procedures in washing a car. We're going to go through those procedures and show you some of the right chemicals to use. The first thing you need to consider when you're washing your car is what type of soap to use. We have a car wash soap, and we have a dishwashing detergent. The reason you don't want to use a dishwashing detergent is because these are engineered to cut grease and to cut wax, to cut things off your dishes. And they will actually strip the wax coating off your car, and it's a little bit harsh. The reason they're different is because of the pH value in the actual soap. This is more acidic. This is a car wash soap specifically designed for cars. It's a much milder soap and will actually get the job done and leave your car even a little bit more brilliant. This is definitely what you want to reach for. You want a nice wash mitt. Don't just grab the first rag that you see. These wash mitts are nice soft nap. They're designed to wash cars. It's not going to scratch. It's not going to be abrasive. And when they're done, the best thing about these is that they're disposable. You just throw it out and grab another one. They're inexpensive and it's good insurance on washing your car properly. Why do we have baking soda here? Good question. The reason is that the leaves, the tree sap, the pine needles, bird droppings, environmental fallout, all of these things are acidic and can really etch into your paint. Now you can wash the things off, but you need to neutralize the acid. That's where the baking soda comes in. What we do is put about a teaspoon, give or take, into a quart of warm water. And after we do our initial car wash, we'll give it our neutralized baking soda bath, and that will neutralize that acid and stop that from acting further. Spend a little time making sure that you're getting clean water on your dirty car rather than the opposite. This bucket here, this is kind of standard affair. Look what's at the bottom of this thing. This is awful. All this stuff, your wash mitt will sit at the bottom of there and it will just wash into all of that dirt, and you'll pick up dirt and grit and cause swirl marks in your finish and just kind of make a mess. Not what you want to do. We will use this wash bucket, but certainly not for painted surfaces. Now this bucket is designed to be your wash buddy. It's got casters that you can pull it around with. It's got a screw on top that will keep dirt and debris from falling into your wash water after you're through. But the best thing is that it's got this pickup screen that drops down into the bucket, lets the dirt fall down through it, and lets your wash mitt sit on top in the clean water. This is definitely something that you need to consider. Good investment. Fill your wash bucket partway up first, then add soap. Bathing is good, but we're washing the car right now. Don't be cheap with the soap either. Car wash, with its lower pH, seems to lose its suds after a while, and you want good cleaning action. You never ever want dry contact with your car. Always pre-wet the vehicle before soaping it down. Notice also that I'm inside. It's a beautiful day outside, but it's risky washing a car in the sun. Your water dries out, your soap can dry on the car, and you'll use twice as much water trying to keep it all wet. With my mitts sopping in soapy water, I always start at the top of the vehicle. Gravity is always present, so use it to your advantage. Wash your car from the top down. I like to section a vehicle off. Wash a section, then rinse, then move on. This allows you to keep the soap from drying on the vehicle and also make sure that your surface is always wet before you start washing it. I have a definite pattern. Wash, then rinse. Wash, then rinse. Just like when I'm painting a car, I like to work my way forward. This is just my thing, but it allows me to keep track of where I'm going. Okay, why am I switching buckets? Good question. I have dishwashing detergent, which is a stronger soap, in the second bucket. This is for rockers, wheels, lower portions of the car that usually get a lot more crud on them, and they're usually harder to clean. Notice that I'm not bringing the mitt up very far. I don't need to. These areas are already washed and don't need the harsh dish soap on them. Plus, the wash water from the wheel and the rocker bucket is going to be dirtier, and I don't want to share that debris with the more visible panels. This car's wheels were pretty clean with minor brake dust and debris, so a wash mitt takes care of the dirt and gets in the crevices nicely. If you've got stubborn brake dust, here's what to do. Use a special cleaner designed for wheels. This one is safe on aluminum and clear-coated wheels, meaning the acid content is less. But don't ever let it dry on the wheels, so start with a wet surface as well. All of the supplies I'm using are from popular automotive retailers, including this wheel brush. The bristles are soft and it's great for getting into tight areas and spokes. For the tires, I use a white wall cleaner and just gently scrub with a soft bristled brush. This gets rid of not only dirt, but also oxidation that's sitting on the rubber. It leaves a nice clean look to the tires. Now that the tire and wheel are completely clean, you can let it dry and add a tire dressing later if desired. If you've been the victim of a bird bomb, remember this. Birds eat rocks to help with their digestion, and they pass them through as well, so be careful when washing off bird droppings. Wet the spot, then blot it carefully until it's gone. Don't grind the poo into your paint job. Now, before we start blasting away under here, there's a couple things you want to consider. First off, there's some electrical connections here that you don't necessarily want to get totally saturated with water. They're designed to take a little bit, just regular due to driving conditions, but you don't want to soak them too bad. So let's cover them up first. Now, we're not doing a waterproof job. What we're going to do is just deflect a lot of the water that would come from the hose from going in the first place. Now, this car has electronic ignition, but if your vehicle has a distributor, you want to bag that as well as bagging your carburetor. You don't want water to get inside those components. Before I go any further, I'll vacuum out any debris from the cowl or engine bay that may mix in with our cleaning supplies. Just like the outside, we start with a wet surface. Chemicals and cleaners can be harsh, and the water acts as a buffer from damaging substances. I'm using an organic cleaner that is strong, but also safe to use on most surfaces. Using a soft bristled brush will take care of most of the dirt and grime, but also get into the crevices and textured surfaces. Here's a great tip. If you soak any electronic connections down and cause a no-start situation, spray some spray lubricant into the contacts. The lubricant displaces the moisture and establishes a good contact. Again, trust me on this one. It works. Once we're finished, I'll rinse and let dry. And I may hit the key just once to make sure it starts again. With a dry surface, I can now get a close look at the paint. And it doesn't look so good. There's pretty substantial fallout damage, or what's commonly known of as acid rain damage. This is what happens when harsh chemicals combine with moisture and etch into your vehicle's paint. This can be repaired most times, but here's where the baking soda solution comes into play. I'm simply washing the car down with our baking soda and water mix, and letting it stop the acidity in its tracks. If you decide to go ahead and repair, ignore, or even paint over top of panels without doing this step, the acid just keeps on working, eventually right down to the undercoats and substrate. This is a very, very important step in good paint finish maintenance. After washing and rinsing again, I use an absorbent cloth to dry the painted surfaces. Some people like an organic chamois, but I prefer the synthetic ones. They just seem to stay softer and last longer. Now I'm ready to try and repair the etching damage, starting with the least aggressive method first. I'm using a microfiber cloth just to give me the best possible polishing surface. And although that helps, I can still see the etched imprint. So that tells me I need to move on and go to the next step. Just use just a little bit. Focus on a different area. And again, it's helping, but it's not getting me there. It's not getting rid of those etch marks. We know that we've stopped the acid from working by neutralizing with our baking soda, so we're safe to repair on top of this. We're going to a little bit coarser abrasive on this panel. And you can hear a little bit more harshness in this. And I'm applying a little bit of pressure because I want to see some action. I want to see my panel coming back to life. And again, I can see scratches that the polish is making because it's abrasive, but it's still not getting rid of my etch. Ultimately, I kind of think I know where we're going with this. But I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. You can really hear that grit in that polish.
Even buffing didn't help much, so I'll start with color sanding with Norton Ultrafine Wet Sandpaper, 2000 grit. With both surfaces wet with soapy water to lubricate, I sand in a circular motion using light pressure. With the compound dried to a haze, I clean it with a microfiber cloth, and you can see the dramatic difference. Now for the second stage of buffing, this time with a machine glaze and a fine pad. Cross-contaminating your pads is bad news. One pad and one compound for each step. I buff until there's a fine haze left over, and hand polish to a final gloss. It's an involved process and a big job, but you can really rescue a paint job like this. The difference is very obvious.
When you're dealing with the interior of your car, here's a couple of things that you might want to have on hand. First thing is a vacuum. The bigger the better. You're definitely going to need that for the big chunks. Second thing, if you can get it, a little bit of compressed air to blow stuff out of the crannies, and it really helps with dust removal and getting into some tight crevices. You also want to have some soft bristled brushes. Now, instead of driving stuff into crevices and into seat cracks and things like that, you can actually work it out with these soft bristled brushes. These are cheap. If they get dirty, you can throw them away. Also, a disposable toothbrush. These are really inexpensive and very, very nice. The plastic bristles are soft enough to where they won't damage leather. Finally, you can get a horsehair brush. Something like this is available at any detail shop or supply store. These come in really handy. Now, for cleaning glass and even some vinyl and upholstery, I like to use an aerosol glass cleaner. Now, the aerosol glass cleaners have a little bit of alcohol in, so it's a good propellant. It evaporates quickly. It doesn't stay and saturate a lot. Plus, they're very convenient in the sense that they're inexpensive to buy, and you can put them up on the shelf and use them for a multitude of different purposes. When you're dealing with your cleaned panels, I really don't like that greasy feel of a dressing type of a material. What I prefer to use is a conditioner. Now, this is a vinyl and rubber conditioner, kind of an all-purpose thing. It's really good for your weather strip, And it's also good for your door panels. Now, use this as a cleaning base, and you won't have that greasy feel. You will also have excellent UV protection. Now, you can be a little more aggressive with your carpets. You can get an aggressive carpet stain remover and a stiffer bristled brush and really get that ground in stuff down out of the pile of the carpet. There's one last thing. If you've got gum or tar or anything ground into your carpet, a citrus-based cleaner will work wonders, and we'll show you how.
The first thing I always do is vacuum the seats and carpet. Use a soft bristled brush in the vents and crevices to dislodge any crud that's hiding. Next, I take my aerosol glass cleaner and clean the trim pieces. It works great on vinyl and leather. A soft detailing brush combined with the cleaner does a nice job in the crevices. It's all in the details, and this is what separates a nice detail job from just a surface job. The same technique works great on speaker grills as well. Spray the cleaner onto your brush, not onto the speaker. I'm not big on using dressings and enhancers to clean with. That's just a band-aid. Clean everything first, then if it needs it, use a dressing to enhance. Here I'm using a conditioner sprayed onto a soft bristled toothbrush to detail the radio and switches. The soft bristles won't scratch the plastic or painted parts. Now I use a rubber and vinyl conditioner, not a tire dressing. This stuff leaves a brightened look, but not a greasy feel. The instrument cluster is covered by clear plastic, not glass, and can scratch easily. I'm using car polish and a microfiber cloth to clean the lens. Spray upholstery cleaner works great on velour seats. Just spray it on and scrub with a medium bristled brush. It may take several applications for stubborn stains, but again, the results are well worth the effort. You can get a little more aggressive on your carpet, and the cleaners are generally stronger. Most household carpet cleaners work well, but there's a great selection at your automotive retailers too. Follow your cleaner with the vacuum to get the leftover dirt and debris out of the way. If you've got crazy stains on your carpet, you can remove it from the vehicle to clean and power wash it. Most carpet is a molded one-piece unit. It comes out with removal of the seats and the plastic trim moldings.
Chewing gum, one of the hardest things to get out of carpet. Watch. This stuff, you can't wear it out. And it's in there. I'm going to show you something really cool.
I'm using a citrus cleaner from a home center that works like magic on gum and other stains as well.
You can fight with chewing gum with different chemicals for hours. I've even tried cutting it out before I found out about this. And this just works like magic. Quick vacuum, and we're back in business right here. This is some great stuff to have on hand. Now, if your carpet is sun bleached or faded, or like this piece has a little bit of the mange, there is an alternative to replacement. You can use a carpet dye or a fabric dye and give it a good temporary fix. Now, this is black. It's going to match pretty good. Different color carpets, they might respond a little bit differently, but there are a lot of different colors. There's a lot of variety in these carpet paints, and it'll get you by until you can afford to replace the carpet. So simply clean the carpet like we've done. And that gives us an excellent alternative to replacing that carpet.
So what do you do with cigarette burns and uncleanable stains? I'll show you. I'll repair this burn mark by first cutting the burned fibers out of the stained area with a single-edged razor blade. Take your time and make sure you get all the bad parts out, but don't cut through the carpet backing. Now we've got a hole to fill, so we'll harvest some fuzz from other areas of the carpet. It's usually best to scrape your fuzz from under a seat or console in an inconspicuous place for obvious reasons. With a good supply of carpet shavings, I start by carefully applying some plastic trim and emblem adhesive to the bottom of my repair. With the glue still tacky, I start inserting the fuzz back into the hole to fill it up. Carefully add your harvested fuzz until you level off the divot and dab it down so that it has a chance to contact the glue. With a horsehair brush, I blend my repair into the surrounding carpet, careful not to disturb the glue until it's dry, which usually takes a few hours until it's safe to vacuum. Leather is so popular in vehicles now that it's easy to take it for granted and neglect it. I'm using my spray glass cleaner again to test a small spot and see if it cleans without damaging. Well, it does, and although the seat didn't look all that dirty, the clean spot shows up great, so we'll clean the whole seat bottom and back. I follow right behind with my wipe towel to monitor my progress. Once I'm satisfied with my cleaning job, I bring out the leather conditioner and spray the whole surface down and gently wipe the excess off. This leaves a renewed leather with its rich color and softness back again. Here's a quick tip for freshening up your car's interior. Febreze makes an automotive fabric spray that leaves you with that new car smell. It's available at most automotive retailers.
This is a late model seat in a vintage 60s muscle car. It's a great combination because it gives good comfort with a really classic look. Now, the problem with these seats is that they're bolstered, and this really kind of takes a lot of abuse more than any other part of the seat, getting in and out. Right here we can see it's split, and it's just basically worn down. This is a pretty comfortable fix. We're going to show you how to take care of that.
I start off by cleaning the whole seat with acetone, which is very aggressive and the reason I'm wearing gloves. I'll be using aerosol interior dye on the repair and the rest of the seat, so I want to make sure it's very clean and free of any conditioners and contamination. I follow that with a gray scuffing pad to rough up the surface slightly and give a little prep for the leather and vinyl parts of the seat. Again, I follow with another wipe down with acetone to really clean the seats. Don't do this if you're not going to follow with a top coat. You may damage the color of your leather or vinyl. Now mask any areas that I don't want to paint, such as seat controls and plastic moldings. Once I've outlined all the areas I want to mask, I follow up with masking paper and cover anything I don't want to get overspray on. I'm using a popular off-the-shelf repair kit that's been available for years. The first step is to apply the clear filler to the damaged area. As it tacks up, I smooth it out with a spreader to even it out and form it into shape. This sometimes takes several applications, so be prepared for a couple of coats. Once you're satisfied with the first step, move on to the color palette. Our selection is easy, we're just using straight black, but the kit comes with primary colors and a guide so you can mix and match any color. The color has some filling properties too, but it's more for pigment than repair. Just blend it into your surrounding seat area. We're not done yet. The cool part of this kit is that you can match the texture of your upholstery with the patterned paper supplied in the kit. Once you've chosen the right pattern, just apply it over the color with it still fairly tacky. Using a local heat source, I heat up the anvil before pressing it into the patterned paper. As you press it into the paper, it forces the pattern that's on the other side of the paper into your repair, while at the same time heat curing the whole process. Once it's been left to cool for a few minutes, the reveal is a very nice looking repair. Dyeing the surface of the seat is as simple as any spray can coating. Use overlapping patterns and a smooth, uniform coat. The first coat should be a medium to light coat where you don't wet the dye down with each stroke, but make sure it's nice and even by using overlapped paint strokes and working your way from one end to the other. After testing to see if it's dry to touch, I apply a second heavier coat to finish this project off. I'm using appropriate safety gear, and you should too. There are toxic chemicals in all spray paints that you don't want to get into your system. After about an hour, I unmask the seat frame, plastic moldings, and trim parts that I've masked up before. Here's our repair, and here's our re-dyed leather seat. It looks great, and the repair is very durable and should last for years. We've all seen the headliners in some late model cars, drooping down, stapled in place, even thumbtacked up so they're not hanging down onto the driver's head. This is a pretty common problem in a lot of the 80s and 90s vehicles, but the good news is that the fix is not really that difficult. First, you need to remove the headliner. You'll have to remove the sun visors, dome lights, surround moldings, using pry tools and screwdrivers. Keep in mind that some of the plastic gets brittle with age, so you need to be careful. The first step is to remove the old rotted fabric from the board. Most of it should come off by hand at this stage, and it just needs to be thrown away. With the fabric out of the way, you can easily remove the separated foam with a brass bristled brush with soft bristles. The one I'm using is for scrubbing pots, but it works great for this application. You don't want to get too aggressive, but this step takes a little work, and you want to get as much of the old material off as possible. Work at it until you have no more loose debris and a clean board, and you're ready for the next step. The heads-up headliner kit we got came with factory-matched fabric as well as a can of spray adhesive, and enough fabric to do 2 of the small El Camino headliners we're working on. With your fabric laid out foam side up, place the board on top to get a feel for where you'll have to trim the edges. I like to make sure I've got plenty of overlap to allow for adjustment. Once I've centered my board, I trim off the excess. I like to have a few inches on each side just to be safe. With my rough cut done, I flip the board over with the fabric side facing me and test fit the fabric again. Make sure you have the foam side toward the headliner at this point, just like it will be installed. Again, I'm double checking to make sure I've got good overlap on all sides. Once I'm satisfied with the position, I fold one half of the liner back to expose the board and the underside of the fabric. Our adhesive came with the kit, but you can find spray glue at home centers, craft shops, and upholstery shops. It's fairly easy to come by. Make sure you shake the can thoroughly, then start spraying an even coat on the headliner board and overlap the wide spray pattern that comes out. Smooth, even strokes make a smooth, even coat. Don't hurry at this point, you've got plenty of time here. And notice that I'm wearing gloves and a mask. Always work in a well-ventilated area too. Don't take chances with safety. Now spray an even coat on the fabric itself, all the way out to the edges. The adhesive dries very fast, and with it still tacky, I fold the fabric back onto the board, working from the middle out. The reason I do this with the glue still pliable is that if I make a mistake, it's a little more forgiving. I'm being very careful as I work and taking my time, making sure the fabric is free of any wrinkles or folds. Once I've got my first side worked out smooth, I expose the other half and pull it back slightly past the glue to overlap a little and make sure that I don't have pockets with no adhesive. Same story here on this side, just smooth, even strokes for a smooth, even coat of adhesive. And again on the fabric as well, apply a nice, even coat of glue. Contact adhesives are pretty forgiving, and your window of opportunity to lay down your fabric is pretty long, but read any instructions on your particular adhesive just to be sure. Again, I'm smoothing out the fabric by hand, making sure there are no folds or wrinkles and that it fits into all the contours of the headliner board. Once I'm satisfied with the front side, I flip the board over and spray another coat of glue on the overlap areas to make sure I get a good bond on the back side. I trim the excess to about 1.5 inches after I've sprayed the glue to make sure I have room for an even coat on my overlap fold. After trimming, I simply fold the fabric onto the board and work my way around the headliner board. For the dome light opening, I spray a coat of glue. Then with the single-edged razor blade, I trim the center of the opening and make some relief cuts at either end to fold it over onto the board. And then I just fold the fabric back onto the board, making a nice neat opening that looks professionally upholstered from the front side. Here's a tip for relocating your mounting screws. Use an awl or a small screwdriver and poke it through the headliner and simply mark with an ink marker on the front side. This keeps you from damaging the fabric trying to locate holes blindly. Installation is simply the reverse of removal. You should keep up with all your fasteners, and if there's a lot, bag and label them to avoid any confusion during reassembly. finished product looks fantastic, and it's literally as easy as it looks.
Now, to put a really effective cleaning on our glass, I'm going to show you an old school detailing trick. All we're doing is taking regular newsprint. And I told you before, I prefer an aerosol glass cleaner just because it's nice and compact. Works really well. So we just take our newsprint, and it really stops from streaking. You don't get hardly any of those streaks. And it takes no time to get a nice streak-free finish on the outside of our glass. You're not done yet. You see this streak around here? You can't get to that with the window up. Take care of that with it down. Now we're done.
Everybody gets rock chips in their windshield at some point, and usually that signals the beginning of the end of a piece of glass. There is a way to repair chips very effectively that also stops the chips and cracks from growing. Here's how it works. Clean the repair area with alcohol and a clean rag, nothing else. Start by assembling the unit and screwing the injector into the bridge until it comes through about 1/8 of an inch. Place the bridge so that the injector end is directly over the damaged area and press down the suction cups. Be careful not to screw the injector too far or it may damage the windshield. Put about 10 drops of the supplied resin into the injector. This is a UV cured material, so you don't have to add anything to it. Place the insert into the injector and slowly screw it in until it's fairly tight. Hydraulic pressure from screwing the injector in forces the resin into the chip. And releasing the pressure by unscrewing the insert later allows air to escape from the damaged area. The leftover pit or divot can be filled by clear nail polish after the resin has cured. To cure the resin, simply leave the car outside in the sun for about an hour. After a while, a windshield will just wear out from road debris. This system of cleaner and polish really helps to improve the visibility in a worn windshield. This is a 3-step system, and the first thing is to clean with a supplied cleaner and a dry cloth. The second step is the clay cleaner, which slightly resembles spray cheese but doesn't taste nearly as good. There's an applicator sponge that comes with the kit for spreading and scrubbing the clay into the glass. We need to clean the clay off after scrubbing it evenly into the surface. This again is cleaned with the supplied cleaner that comes with the kit. The diamondite shield is sprayed on and let dry to a fog. This can take up to 30 minutes on a humid day, so be patient. After the shield is dry, buff it off using a microfiber cloth until you don't see any more streaks or haze. The shield is activated with moisture. I spray it onto the microfiber and rub it into the windshield. This treatment will last several months and gives an amazing improvement in visibility, especially at night. I'm using 600 grit sandpaper on a piece of vintage door glass to simulate wiper scrubs and general wear on old glass. It hurts to do it, and it takes a while to screw this glass up, but the fix for this is pretty amazing. The rhodite glass polishing compound comes in powdered form and is mixed with distilled water until a pasty consistency is achieved. The hard felt buff is first soaked in water, then attached to a variable speed drill for polishing. With the buff dipped into compound, I start to polish a path through the center of my sanding marks. I'm wearing safety glasses to protect against any flying debris from the drill or the surface. This takes a while and may need several applications of compound, but you can feel when your surface is getting smoother. Using a glass cleaner, I clean away the compound residue to see what my surface looks like. And as the glass dries, you can clearly see the smooth, renewed path that I've polished into my sanded surface. No voodoo here, this product really works. Modern composite headlights are much more efficient design, but when they get a little age on them, the lenses deteriorate into a foggy yellow color. What we're using is actually a metal polish, but it works great on plastic as well. Using a cone-shaped buff mounted on a drill, I polish the headlight surface with medium to heavy pressure. Then I switch to a softer buff to polish out the lens at a higher RPM. And finally hand rub with another application of polish and a shop towel. You can see a huge difference in the clarity of the lens in just a few minutes. For really stubborn haze and oxidation, I use 2000 grit wet sandpaper and soapy water to lubricate. I sand the whole surface of the lens while keeping it lubricated. As I wipe the sanding residue off, the lens dries to a dull look. This is normal and will soon be corrected. Again, I apply a small amount of metal polish to the surface and evenly buff the lens back to gloss. One more application and I final polish by hand rubbing with the shop towel. All it takes is a little elbow grease and the right tools. The light looks good until you see the other side. Then it looks great. This will also really improve your headlight's nighttime performance. Uncoated plastic moldings, handles, and mirrors can dull and stain over time, but they can be revived. It's a simple process with Plastic Renew. You simply clean the surface and scrub the raw plastic with the supplied steel wool, being careful not to scratch the paint around the handle or molding. After that, you apply 2 to 3 coats of the Plastic Renew liquid. It etches into the pores of the plastic and leaves a cleaned and brightened look. Factory color match touch-up paint is readily available from most automotive retailers and makes touching up rock chips a snap. It costs a fraction of what professional paints do to have mixed, and there's even an all-in-one repair kit available that comes with filler, primer, prep materials, and clear coat. All you do is add the color. It's important to repair the rock chips as they happen so rusting doesn't start. This is just one more reason to inspect your vehicle often, repair damage as it happens, and protect your investment. This scratch on the rocker panel is a good example of a typical paint scratch. First, I clean the surface in and around the scratch to prep for painting. If you've got crud in your chip or scratch, or if there's rust starting to form, this fiberglass sanding pen is fantastic for prep. The strands of glass reach down into the crevice and clean very effectively. A scuff pad works well too, but this is much more precise. Now I use another factory match touch-up color to fill in the scratch. You don't want to apply too much or it'll run. Just do one coat at a time. After it's dry to the touch, which usually takes about 5 minutes, apply another heavier coat. Your goal here is to bring the level of the new paint above the existing finish, so a third or fourth coat may be necessary depending on the depth of the scratch. Now I wet sand the repair with 1500 grit paper to level everything together. You don't want to bear down too hard, so use light pressure and lots of water. I check my progress by drying the panel, and I'm ready for compounding. Medium grade rubbing compound is used to polish the gloss back into the area. This requires some elbow grease and may need several applications of compound to get full gloss. The finished look is an invisible repair. Solid colors are almost always successful, but metallics are usually more of a compromise and won't tolerate much sanding before polish. Since we're talking about paint codes, here's some common locations for different manufacturers. For newer Chrysler vehicles, check the driver's door ID decal. For older Chryslers, check the radiator support metal tag or cowl screen tag. For Nissan, check the driver's side hinge pillar decal. For Toyota, check the driver's side latch pillar decal. Most GM passenger cars have an ID tag with code information in the trunk, but trucks and vans usually have this information in the glove compartment. For Fords, check the driver's door jamb ID tag. With most aftermarket and some OE wheels, you can see right through to the brake calipers, which don't always look their best. Here's a quick and effective detail for dingy-looking brake calipers and drums. These kits come in a variety of colors, but the procedures are the same for all. Using the supplied cleaner, carefully clean the surface of the caliper of brake dust and any residue that will interfere with adhesion. Then you want to mask off any parts that you don't want paint on, just to be safe. Use common sense and proper safety equipment when handling any paint. No reducer or hardener is needed, just a thorough mixing and it's ready to apply. The first coat needs to go on fairly light, but still a nice even coat with good coverage. Take your time and don't splatter any paint. Try not to get any runs or drips, as this extends the dry time of the paint. After 15 to 20 minutes of flash time, apply a second, heavier coat. A third may be necessary depending on coverage and color, but ours look great with just 2. After your final coat, let it dry for at least 2 hours before unmasking and installing your wheels. And allow the paint to fully cure for 24 hours before regular use. This is one of those really great detail tricks that will give your vehicle a little more sparkle with little or no maintenance. These sand-colored Packard fenders will serve as a good example of what you can do with dull, lifeless metallic colors, but also what happens when you overbuff and burn through the surface. A lot of 60s and 70s cars have single-stage enamel or lacquer paint that's seen better days. If a repaint is not in the picture, buffing can really help out your paint finish. After cleaning, I place a piece of masking paper over our fenders so we can get a good comparison. I'm using a 3-step compound system by Norton, but there are alternatives available. Coarse cutting cream is the first stage, followed by lighter, less abrasive compounds and steps. Clear-coated finishes have that layer of protection over the pigment that single-stage finishes just don't have, so you've really got to be careful when buffing them out. You can ruin a paint job very quickly. I've seen it happen many times. If you use a different polish, use a different pad. Don't cross-contaminate. We're using a lighter polish, and the pads in the system are color-coded to correspond. I'll clean the surface with a microfiber cloth and add our second compound. You don't want to use too much compound. It just makes a mess and you end up wearing it or slinging it all over everything else in the room. A dime to a quarter-size blob is plenty. I always like to spritz a little water on my surfaces to keep from dry buffing. And when I buff, I'm using light and even pressure. Slow, steady movements. You want to control your equipment at all times. The third step is a machine glaze with a fine foam pad. Again, a different color and a very different texture. I clean the surface and add a dime-sized blob of polish. Lubricate my pad and surface and start buffing. I finish up by hand buffing with my microfiber cloth and gently give it a final polish. The difference between our before and after is obvious. We've greatly improved the gloss, which brings back the richness of the color. But here's the danger in buffing single-stage metallics. I've buffed completely through this peaked edge and down to the original paint job without realizing it. And on a customer's car, that could mean a repaint. Just remember to use caution. Over-buffing can ruin a paint job. This is a fairly common situation as well. A vehicle that was painted a non-clear coat color at the factory has been repaired with a base coat clear coat system. This looks great until the original paint starts to fade at a different rate than the new clear coat, which hardly fades at all. While this can be buffed and polished to look nice again, keep in mind that without that layer of clear coat protection, you're buffing off more and more strength and color every time you buff, and that eventually the vehicle will need repainting. This car has black plastic accents and handles. Compound will stain them, so I mask them off with automotive masking tape to protect them. Rubbing compound can be aggressive, so I also mask off painted areas that I'm not buffing to protect them from debris and swirl marks. With my panels clean and protected, I start buffing with the medium-grade automotive rubbing compound. The results are almost instant, and you can see a nice finish hiding under that oxidized layer. Hold your buffer flat while working, with one edge slightly raised, and make sure you have enough compound so that your pad is never dry. Using a little water and a microfiber cloth, I hand rub the residue off the panel. Now I'll finish the panel off with a hand polish to even out the gloss. Turning your cloth frequently helps speed up the process and make sure that you have a clean contact with your painted surface. I'll remove my masking tape and use a soft bristled brush to remove any compound or polish that's been forced into the crevices. Don't leave this step too long. Once some compounds harden, they can be extremely difficult to remove, and car wax just plain looks bad on panel edges. Our door looks like we painted it instead of buffed it. And with a gloss on the surface where we can actually see the color, it now matches the clear-coated panels. Rubbing out a panel like this may only be borrowing time, and it might only last a couple of months before it needs doing again, but it's a nice short-term fix.
Before color sanding and buffing, you want to make sure that you know the type of surface that you're working with. There's a couple of different ways to test this, the first and easiest one being simply sanding the surface. And if you pull up the color on the paper that you're sanding, you know that it's a single-stage finish. And you've got to be a little more careful with buffing. This could be an enamel, a lacquer, or a urethane. It's a single stage, though. Another method of testing is to put a strong solvent on the finish and see if it moves or shifts the finish. We're going to start with an eyedropper. Now you can see immediately what the acetone does. See that? It's absolutely shifted the surface. We know to be very careful when we're buffing this. We use our same solvent on the red car. And it's undamaged and it pulls up and there's no red pigment on our rag. So we know that this is a clear coat finish. It's thermoset. It's not going to go anywhere, and we're safe to color sand and buff. Color sanding and buffing is a process of leveling the top of the paint and then buffing it back up to gloss. Right here we've got a stripe that's underneath the clear coat and a little bit of a ridge right here. I want to color sand that flat and buff it up to gloss using a great system of compounds. I've got my paper. It's been soaking so that when I fold the edges it doesn't make ridges on the crease and dig into the paint. And we're wet sanding. I'm lubricating the panel and the paper. I'm sanding in a circular motion. I'll be using 2 stages of sanding. Our first stage here is with 1500 grit. And the second stage will be 2500 grit. Norton paper, fantastic stuff. Works very well. Okay, now I've sanded. I can't see anything. Watch this. Right there. A water blade is an excellent way to monitor the progress of your color sanding. And we can see here, as it dries, that we've sanded nice and level. Coming back to the second stage of color sanding with my 2500 grit. I've lubricated both sides, both surfaces. And again, I'm sanding in a circular motion. That's my preference. What it does is it breaks up the lines. If you sand like this, you're going to dig lines in it. It's going to be harder to buff out. So this just breaks up your direction a little bit and gives you an easier time buffing the sanding scratches out in the first place. This system of compounds is designed to remove everything from 1000 grit scratches right on up to final waxing and glazing. It works very well. Here's how it's done. We've got our sand scratches here. We're going to use our cutting cream, put about a quarter size down. And again, we don't want to dry buff. So I'm spritzing a little bit of water on my pad and on my surface, keeping my cord off the car on my shoulder. One more thing I want you to notice. We've covered off our grating and our grill and our detail work here with masking paper. This is very, very important to do. Sometimes it's nearly impossible to get the stuff out of the cracks and crevices, so be proactive. At a very low RPM, we're doing our compound work. This keeps the compound on the surface that you want to work. Okay, that's coming up nicely, but I need a little more compound. I've got very light pressure on the buffer as well. Good. I really like the way this is coming up. This paint job is about 5 years old, so the paint is fully cured. On fresh paint, this is going to come up a lot faster. But right now, we're going to go for a third application. A little bit more compound. Okay, good. I can see by my reflection that I've got all my sanding scratches out, but we've got smudges and a little bit of debris from the pad here. You never want to cross-contaminate your pad, so you always want to clean this up before you go on to the next step. Here again, a little spritz of water, a microfiber rag, and we're just gently getting rid of the undesirable stuff. We've got hook and loop fasteners that attach these pads. One of the cool things about this is we've got a self-centering nub here. It works very well. Good. Perfectly centered. That's hard to do without that nub. So now we're going to spritz our area. We'll move to the second stage of compound, which will still remove scratches, but it also polishes. Right. Your subsequent steps from your compounding, they're not going to take very long. We're ready to move on. Again, I don't want to cross-contaminate, so I'm cleaning again with water and my microfiber. And I'm ready for my final step, which is the black pad and a finishing glaze. You'll notice that I'm not using very much product. The reason for this is because sometimes product can mask what the reaction is to the surface. You want to read the surface, not look through the smears of the stuff that you're putting on the car. See, that's come up beautifully. It's gotten rid of my ridge. It's nice and level, great distinctness of image. Works very well. One more final step. Since this is cured paint, we can put a wax on it. Fresh paint, you want to stay away from waxes. They have a cure window, you don't want to seal it in.
You can see by the reflection that we've completely leveled the surface and brought it back to an amazing gloss. These techniques work well on a wide variety of surface imperfections. Rail dust, overspray, bugs, tree sap, and road tar can look bad and may actually ruin your vehicle's paint job. Clay Magic has been around for a few years and it's a great but well-kept secret. Apply the lubricating spray and lightly rub the surface with the clay bar into the finish. You'll be able to feel when it's clean and then you can move on to the next section. The clay lifts out the dirt and debris, and the lubricating spray actually keeps it from scratching back into the finish. This process also works great on glass, chrome, and fiberglass as well. When you're finished, store the reusable clay bar back in its box for the next time. Dry the panel off with a soft towel. Then use a small amount of the supplied wax to polish and protect the panel. Microfiber is the only polishing cloth I use anymore. They work great on almost anything. The biggest thing you'll notice after a Clay Magic treatment is the smoothness of the panel. Compared to the untreated surface, it feels like silk.
Now this car looks great. It's very shiny. However, there's a layer of dust on here that can be very damaging to the paint. Fortunately, there's some great products that we can use on this. Eliminate the dust and give yourself a quick detail while you're at it. This detailing spray is very simple to use. Just spritz it on and take a microfiber cloth and just gently rub. And it not only eliminates the dust, but it does a very nice job on the gloss too. I've seen a lot of people really struggle trying to apply vinyl pinstripe tape. It's just not that difficult. I've got some great tips for you, but before we go on and stripe our car, it's got to be clean. We're using a regular aerosol glass cleaner. Aerosol glass cleaner contains alcohol and will remove solvent-based as well as organic contamination from painted surfaces. The vinyl stripe is sandwiched in between a layer of cellophane on the top and paper on the back to protect the adhesive. The cellophane on top acts as a great guide and will help you actually apply the stripe, so leave it on. You're also going to need a single-edged razor blade to trim your edges. So we'll get that started. Be very careful when handling these. I'm going to set mine right up there for now. Now, I've seen a lot of guys try and put this stuff on an inch at a time, and what you end up with is it's just, and I'm exaggerating, I guess, but it's really hard to make a straight line a little bit at a time. Something like that doesn't help. You can use the tension of the tape itself to really help you. So here's what I suggest. Tack it at the front, and without peeling any of the backing off, go ahead and stretch it out and get as much tape as you're going to need in one cut, all the way to the back. Take it off, just tear it neatly, and then try not to let your stripe hit the floor at all, because there's a possibility of getting dirt and stuff in it. Now, it almost doesn't really matter what our stripe tape is doing on the front, because we can reapply this and pull it, and you'll see what I'm talking about later. One thing you do want to be aware of is your transitions over your panels need to kind of happen together. So we've got that, and as I'm pulling, I'm peeling off the white paper behind it, and I can gently touch the adhesive without really messing it up. And now here's the trick. What you want to do is grab one end, and you can eyeball it. You can look down the side, and you can actually just gently lay it on top. Now we're following the style line of this particular car right up to the quarter, and we're going to do a decorative end. But before we do that, we're just going to let that sit there, and we're going to go on to the front. The styling of the front end of this car is pretty aggressive and kind of sloped, so we can't just come straight across. We want to follow the natural style lines of the vehicle. So what we're going to do is just take our stripe that's lightly tacked on and just lift it, just gently lift it. There we go. And use tension. We're tugging it just a little bit. And we're eyeballing at the same time to make sure our line is straight, and that's good. And we're going to come down. I don't know, let's get creative, let's do something. Here's where your razor blade comes in handy. So I'm thinking that, I don't know, let's do just a line like that. Now I want to separate my cellophane from the actual stripe. And I take the large stripe, which is the top one in this case, and it's slanted down. I remove the cellophane from my narrow stripe. There she comes. Peeling the cellophane back so I can see what I'm doing. Now this is just sort of a gentle pressure. What we're going to do here, I don't know. Let's make a loop. We'll come up and back down into our point. It's just limitless what you can do. And we'll take our blade and trim, and we're done with this end. Now we're ready to move on down the rest of the side of the car. Now we're peeling our cellophane back at the same time as we're pressing the stripe down. It's just a real easy motion. Now before you go any further, it's a really good idea to get into the habit of trimming your tape at the edges. Now don't cut it down the middle and wrap it. What you want to do is trim it about a 1/16 from the edge. This allows it to contract as it ages, and it won't give you a noticeable transition. Looks nice and factory, just like that. So we'll continue on, backing up, pulling our cellophane as we're pressing it down. Same number on our driver's side door gap. And you can just make a gentle slice, it doesn't cut the paint. Bring your blade up, pull your excess away, and we're moving on. Now I want to do another end towards the back end of this quarter panel, so I'm not going to press it down past this. That adhesive will hold it in place. We'll get our cellophane out of the way because that's just the kind of folks that we are. And now I'm going to take the big stripe and pulling it up just really gently. What are we going to do? Let's do another loop down. Come back here and just roll it off into a gentle point. And then we'll take our blade, trim, make sure we went all the way through that. And I'm stopping right after the stripe so I don't cut into the paint. So we've got an angular stripe surrounded with the lines of the car. The whole side is done in moments. Now once you get used to this technique, you can just fly through this stuff. You can get really creative on the ends, do whatever you want to do. That hopefully takes the mystery out of doing the vinyl pinstripes. The rest is up to you. For removing pinstripe, there's a couple different things you want to consider. This stripe has been on here for years. It's brittle, it's hard, it needs to come off. The easiest thing to do, you think, is to get a razor knife and get underneath the stripe and try and peel it off this way. The problem with that is that it's very easy to make a gouge and really ruin your paint job, cause yourself a redo. Fortunately, there's a tool that's very easy. It takes all the breath and all the work out of this. It's just an eraser on a drill. Very cool. You can see what it's doing. It's just rolling the stripe right off of there. It's non-destructive. Very nice tip.
Bright polished chrome looks great. Dull, dirty old chrome looks like, well, dull, dirty chrome. Here's a simple but effective technique for polishing your chrome plating. I cleaned the surface of this old fender molding with steel wool and a spray glass cleaner. Chrome plating is very thin and really quite porous on the surface. The steel wool fibers can get into those spaces and clean very well. I don't like to use polish for a cleaner on any surface, so with my molding cleaned first, I use a metal polish to finish the job. Just like on your painted surfaces, you need a little protection from the elements, and metal polish seals out moisture and gives an enhanced shine, just like waxing the paint on your car. We've all seen chrome get surface rust on it. That just illustrates that it's not bulletproof and is susceptible to moisture damage. With my polishing cloth, yep, you guessed it, microfiber, I buff the excess polish off to achieve my final gloss. This part shined up nicely and is now ready for reassembly. Even if you have brand new chrome, the same rules apply. To give it a layer of protection and a little extra gloss, follow the same procedures as with the old chrome. Apply your metal polish and rub it evenly over the entire piece. Then hand buff to a final gloss. Polished aluminum parts and accessories look great. The problem with aluminum is that it oxidizes fast and is inherently soft. I'll repair this gouge in the pulley cover starting with 220 grit Norton sandpaper. I keep the repair small and just try to smooth out the damage. Being soft also makes aluminum easy to repair, so it's a double-edged sword of sorts. Once I've leveled out my damage with 220 grit, I jump up to 320 grit, basically to repair the scratches I put in with the 220 paper. It's a progressive repair until we get to the point to where we can polish. I expand past my 220 grit sanded area and feather out the repair slightly. Next, I step up to 500 grit and again expand my repair area even wider than the 320. I also lighten up on my pressure and make sure I'm not making gouges or excessive sanding marks in the undamaged metal. The first buffing wheel is coarse, and I use a Triple E compound that works great for aluminum and soft metals, and apply it to the wheel until the surface changes color. The buffing wheel is turning towards me, and I hold the part about 2/3 down, which gives me the best pressure while not allowing the part to get grabbed from my hands. This could not only damage your parts, but you can cause serious damage to your body as well. I monitor my progress often and add compound when I see that the wheel isn't really doing anything. I'm wearing gloves and a face shield. This is not an option. You need to be very careful with any power tools and protect yourself at all times. Once I'm satisfied that I've gotten all of the sanding scratches out of the repair, I move to the fine polishing wheel. I'm using White Rouge compound for the final polish, which happens much more quickly than the initial stages. I also polish the rest of the surface of my part so the repair blends in. Using a fine metal polish, I polish by hand to remove any smudges or residue on the part. My repair looks good and the part has been buffed up to its former glory, but we're not done yet. Like I said before, aluminum is a soft metal and oxidizes quickly, so it requires more maintenance than chrome. But if you seal it, you can get as much as 2 years of maintenance-free shine out of your polished or billet aluminum. This comes as a kit and includes everything you need except water, which we filled our bottle up with to the recommended level. The mix is 15 parts of tap water to 1 part of concentrated cleaner, and mix and blend thoroughly. The success of this procedure depends on having a perfectly clean surface, free of debris or contamination in the pores of the aluminum, so several applications of cleaner may be necessary. Once your part is clean and dry, mix both parts of the epoxy sealer together. Keep in mind that you have a fixed shelf life once the epoxy is mixed, but it will last up to 2 weeks if refrigerated. It's still best to have all your parts prepped before beginning the procedure. Mix and blend the 2 components thoroughly, then apply with a soft, dry towel to the part. Wet the whole surface and make sure you don't miss any spots. You don't have to rub it in. It will flow into the pores of the aluminum on its own. Wipe the excess off and don't worry about a haze or a rainbow film that's left on the part. That's normal and will buff off later. After the recommended 12 to 24-hour dry period, you can apply the final sealer onto your polished parts. Unpolished aluminum does not need this step. This sealer has a 10-day cure window, and although the part can be handled once it's dry, care needs to be taken if you need to wash it. Use a mild soapy water with a soft cloth. The part looks great, the repair is almost invisible, and I won't have to polish it again for a couple of years. You gotta love that. The Flitz polisher comes with its own polish and fits onto a drill. I apply the polishing cream to my wheel and rub it around evenly. Then I start polishing. The fingers on the wheel get into the crevices and really work the polish into the tight spots. If you have spoked wheels, this saves a ton of rubbing and does a really nice job. Afterwards, I use a soft cloth to hand polish and buff to a final gloss. Stainless steel used to be the main material for bright work and trim parts on cars. It's easily maintained, never rusts, and is repairable. These rocker moldings from a 67 GTO look their age, and they've got several dents and scrapes in them. First, I clean off the molding to get a closer look at the surface. Glass cleaner and steel wool work well for this too. There are a couple of obvious dents in them and a little road rash, but they're definitely savable. Even severe damage can be repaired, and sometimes these pieces are irreplaceable or very hard to find. Using a hard-faced hammer and a special anvil, I straighten out the obvious damage on the mounting flange. The dent is fixed the same way, using a hammer and anvil to support the metal and slowly work the steel back into its intended shape. Now I'm using a curved-faced body hammer that closely matches the crown of the part, and gently asking the metal to go back where it belongs.
Can you see them again?
Not really good now.
It's a matter of patience and observation, but eventually the damage is smoothed out. Sort of. The basic crown is back in the panel, but I've created high spots with my hammer blows, so I come back again with a pick hammer and work the high spots. It's a process of working both sides until you've smoothed out the metal, and it takes some doing, but it's definitely worth the time spent to have all original bright work on this car. I've got my part mounted with soft-faced jaws in my bench vise, and I use a fine draw file to level the surface a step further. Keeping my repair small, I work on the surface until it shows me where I'm at. I can still see some low spots, so I go back to my anvil and fine-tune the repair even more. This process takes some time, but it's time well spent and ultimately will pay off, so be patient. When I'm satisfied with this stage of repair, I'll move on to the finishing stages, which include sanding the file marks using progressively finer grits of paper on a DA sander. I'm starting off with 220 again to level off the file marks, and although some people prefer to use wet sanding for these steps, I've found that dry sanding works well too. After I can't see scratches anymore, I graduate to 320 grit paper and go over my work again.
Back on the piece.
Next, I step up to 500 grit and go over my 320 scratches, smoothing things out further.
Yeah, I've been kind of going back and forth.
Final sanding is done with 800 grit, and I sand until I see a smooth, satiny finish with no scratches showing through. Just like buffing paint, you don't want to cross-contaminate your buffer or pads. And we've been buffing aluminum, which takes a different set of compounds. I use a spur and carefully dress the face of both buffing wheels to clean them. I start off with a spiral ventilated compound, but for stubborn or deeper scratches, you can use an emery compound first. I load the wheel with the compound and firmly hold my part 2/3 of the way down the wheel. I apply gentle pressure. I slowly work the surface, adding compound as needed and checking my progress often. I use different angles to access the repair, while not compromising my buffing position. It's easy to lose concentration and have the wheel grab your part right out of your hands at 3600 RPM, so be very careful when choosing how you hold the part to the wheel. When I can no longer see sanding marks, I move on to the polishing step. This step is where you see the work pay off, and it's starting to look really nice, but polish until your surface is consistent and even. With all the scratches polished out, a final hand buff with metal polish is done to enhance the gloss, but also to protect the surface.